Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game, it's Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23. Brought to you by Alpha.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome in to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by our good friends at Alpha Insurance. I'm Gary Harris, live on the University of Alabama campus as we get you ready for the first home football game of the 2019 season at 3 o'clock this afternoon against New Mexico State. A busy day for the Tide means a busy day for us here on CTKO. We'll have guest analysis, feature stories, and so much more. We're glad you're with us. So let's get started right away and get you up to date with the latest on the Crimson Tide with our Bama headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama headlines.
Well, Nick Saban announced this week that redshirt junior defensive back Nigel Knott is no longer part of the football team because he was declared medically unable to perform by the team medical staff. Knott will have his scholarship honored, and he'll be able to continue his pursuit of a degree at Alabama. That's so cool. But Coach Saban says the medical staff felt that it was not in his best interest to be able to continue to play football. Knott was a 4-star recruit out of Mississippi in the 2016 recruiting class. Well, no need to sweat the hot weather if you're going to be inside Bryant-Denny Stadium today. Athletics Director Greg Byrne tweeted out photos last night of one of the many water monster coolers. I think they got 12 of them, along with sunscreen stations. The water is free. You can refill your bottles, and it's going to be icy cold, allowing fans to head to the shady concourse and refresh themselves. And, of course, that sunscreen will come in handy when you're sitting out in the stands. Today's Bama opponent, New Mexico State, is an FBS independent. You don't see many of those anymore. And the first one to take on the Tide since the 2012 BCS National Championship, when Alabama defeated Notre Dame in Miami 42-14 to win it all. That means Coach Saban is 1-0 at Alabama against the independents, and Alabama all-time as a program 4-5 against FBS independents. Of course, most of those games are against Notre Dame. Well, it may be week 2 of the regular season, but it's the first game at home for the Tide in 2019. That also means it's the first week of tailgating on the quad and all around campus, as thousands have descended on T-Town for this year's home opener against New Mexico State. And it's those fans and the university's traditions that make playing here such a special situation. And the Tide is looking forward to making Bryant-Denny Stadium this season. It's home, of course, and they're looking forward to the debut at home this afternoon.
You know, we certainly look forward to a home opener this week. Playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium is always great. The enthusiasm and spirit is something that the players certainly have a lot of appreciation for, and so do we.
I'm excited, play in front of Alabama fans. It's just an exciting experience. We're looking forward to it.
I would say it definitely means something bigger than actually just playing another game, because it's our first home game. We got all the Alabama fans behind us, and I feel like it's kind of a plus for us, for them to kind of just see our energy and also feel their energy, and just kind of match those two together and just come out and play for them.
And Bama and Coach Saban love home openers. The Crimson Tide owns a 78-11-2 record all-time in home openers, and that is across 91 games. Currently, Bama is riding a 17-game winning streak in their home openers, and under Nick Saban, the Tide is 12-0 in Bryant-Denny Stadium season debuts. And it's not just here that Coach Saban has had success in opening games. All time in his collegiate coaching career record, he's 21-2 in home openers. And here's a look at the series history between the Tide and the Aggies, and there is no series history. This will be the first meeting between Bama and New Mexico State, but there will be a second meeting guaranteed. New Mexico State is set to return to Tuscaloosa in November of 2021. So let's get to know the Aggies of New Mexico State. They hail from Las Cruces, located in southeastern New Mexico, just across the state line from El Paso. They've been an FBS independent program since 2017. When they left the Sun Belt Conference, they lost last week's season opener 58-7 at Washington State, but are returning 17 starters from last season. The Aggies are led by Coach Doug Martin. who played at Kentucky. He's entering his 6th season at the helm. Their last bowl appearance came in 2017. That's the first bowl they'd been to in like 50 years, and they defeated South Alabama to clinch a bowl berth that year, and then they beat rival Utah State 26-20 in the Arizona Bowl. The Aggies certainly aren't a traditional powerhouse by any means and aren't likely to put up too much of a resistance today against the Crimson Tide, but Nick Saban says there are things they do that can be difficult to get prepared for.
New Mexico State is a wide open team that they'll do everything they can to expose your weaknesses. They're really kind of pass the ball, lots of spread formations, really do a good job in that part of the game. They've got kind of a veteran team, an experienced quarterback, a good runner, a really good receiver. Defensively, they've got some guys coming back, and they're a pretty good team there too.
And on the flip side, obviously New Mexico State is going to have its hands full with the Crimson Tide, ranked number 2 in the country. As I mentioned last week and today as well, they lost 58-7 to 23rd ranked Washington State. And now they must face the second-ranked team in the country. It's a tall task to ask of anyone. But the Aggies, you might as well be positive, and they're excited about the challenge.
To play college football, to play against great teams and play against great competition. And the fun in college football is to prove that you can compete at a high level. In high school, it's fun just because it's games and the crowd and winning. In college, the fun is, can I compete at the highest level? And so that's where you are this week in particular.
And this afternoon will certainly be a test for Coach Martin and the entire New Mexico State Aggies football team. And not only will they have to face the huge animal, the elephant, if you will, that is Alabama football, the Ags will also have to tackle the hot early September heat right here in Titletown. And it's going to be a scorcher. CTKO's Danielle Davis joins us now from the Walk of Champions with our Alabama game day forecast. Danielle, it's hot.
Gary, I have been outside for about 10 minutes and I'm already ready to get back inside into the air conditioning. It is that hot out right now. If you want to take a look at the Walk of Champions, plenty of people out enjoying, celebrating the Tide, celebrating the day with the home opener. Temperatures right now 90 degrees already here in Tuscaloosa. Beautiful blue sky. And hey, your heat advisory, watch warning map for Central Alabama. Taking a look at that right here. Heat advisory issued until 9 p.m. for Tuscaloosa County this afternoon as feels like temperatures reach into the 100s. Taking a look at that right here, 100 is what it feels like right now in Tuscaloosa, 102 in Jasper. And hey, your game forecast, these temperatures are in the 90s all afternoon, flirting with the 100s. But like I said, inside the stadium today, it is likely to feel like 110 by kickoff. 6 p.m. though, we are cooling back only into the low 90s, so it's going to be mostly sunny for the day and a scorcher of an afternoon. Be safe, guys.
Well, thank you, Danielle, and fans certainly need to take precautions. Well, we're just getting started this afternoon for the first time here on the University of Alabama campus this season, and we're not done yet by a long shot. When we return, we'll hear from Nick Saban on the state of Alabama's kicking game. 2 missed field goals against Duke last week brought back some bad memories, but I tell you what, I don't think the kicking game is going to be in bad shape this year. Plus, we'll take a look back at former Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts as he razzled and dazzled last week in his Oklahoma debut. That and much more when we return to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance here on WVUA 23.
A mic check.
Although the Tide seems to be,
Although the Tide, yeah, I know. Now I'm freaking out. Although the Tide came out with a win last weekend, the team seemed to feel as if they had unfinished business leaving Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
You know what you want to say? So, like, when you're about to go, you know what you want to say.
You're watching Crimson Tide. You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Well, here's a look at the current AP Top 25 poll. No changes at the top. Clemson still number 1. Alabama still number 2. Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and that order, number 3, 4, and 5. New to the top 10, the Auburn Tigers, following their stirring come-from-behind victory over Oregon. They move up 6 spots in the rankings. Not a whole lot of change in the rankings from the preseason so far, just 1 week. A pair of SEC teams hold down the 11th and 12th spots in Florida and Texas A&M. And also of note, Oregon falls to 16th. They were previously ranked 11th in the country and were the only team in the top 25 to lose their opener. Only one team moved into the rankings, and that was Boise State. The Broncos come in at number 24 after beating Florida State. But in a quirk, no team fell out. There was a tie at number 25 between Nebraska and Iowa State. The last time there were 26 teams in the top 25 with a tie for the final spot was November 18th, 2012. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance. I'm Gary Harris, live right here on the beautiful University of Alabama campus. And it's a busy campus. The Tide and the Aggies set to kick it off in a few hours here in the home opener for Alabama, following a season-opening win against the Duke Blue Devils last week in Atlanta. Now, Alabama rolled, of course, and the Tide saw 2 players take home some individual weekly awards. Tua Tagovailoa earned yet another honor as he heads into 2019. He was named the SEC Co-Offensive Player of the Week, sharing the recognition with the much talked about LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. Although Tagovailoa was taken out before the end of the game, the Bama star still finished with 336 passing yards. He was 26 of 31 with 4 touchdowns and no picks. Also making a name for himself, a highly touted true freshman on the Tide's roster, DJ Dale. He started in his first game at nose tackle with the Crimson Tide and accounted for 3 tackles with a half tackle for loss in just his first time on the football field in college. Dale anchored the Alabama defensive line, which allowed just 107 yards rushing in 32 attempts against Duke. The Blue Devils earned only 11 first downs and 3 points against that tenacious Alabama D, led by the freshman nose tackle. How about that? Well, Alabama fans know all too well about the Crimson Tide's kicking game struggles in recent years. It's often considered a curse that Bama kickers, no matter how good they are before they get here, just can't consistently make kicks. That being said, there was a lot of optimism about this year's freshman kicker Will Reichert, a 5-star prospect out of Hoover. And against Duke, he hit it well, made all his extra points, but he hit the upright twice on his 2 field goal attempts. However, he was perfect on extra points, and Coach Saban is confident in his freshman place kicker's strong leg.
You know, Will did great. He kicked a lot of touchbacks, which shows his leg strength. I think he hit both field goals that he hit. He really hit well. Just a little unlucky that both of them hit the pole. But hopefully he'll be able to gain confidence and improve on that in the future.
And just as Saban expects Riker to continue to improve, he expects every member of the Crimson Tide to improve on their Week 1 performance. Despite the convincing win over the Duke Blue Devils, there's room to get better. And it's not just Coach Saban looking for improvement. CTKO's Rhea Thornton joins us now and explains how the entire Alabama roster seemed a little displeased with last week's performance and is looking for a better outcome this afternoon. Rhea?
Although the Tide seems to have had unfinished business when they left Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the team seems to feel that they need to do better this week in this game against New Mexico State.
Battling injuries and suspensions, the Crimson Tide came out for Week 1 against Duke a bit flat, unable to find a steady rhythm against the Blue Devil defense, which held the Tide to a goose egg in the first quarter. But that did not last long.
It's kind of like you get punched and stunned in the first round of a fight, and you don't go down, and you just keep boxing, and the next thing you know, you kind of win the fight and kind of win the momentum of the game as you go.
Although the Tide ended up winning 42-3, Alabama left Mercedes-Benz Stadium with a feeling of uneasiness. Bama did not play for all 4 quarters, one of the team's biggest mottos. And it sparked a team-wide movement to push to improve, starting at QB.
I think he'd be the first one to say that, we left some money on the table at times if we'd have made a little different choices or decisions or whatever, but I thought he really, really played well overall, and he'll be the first one to say, I got some things I want to improve on, and we want to help him do that.
And the entire team echoes that sentiment.
I feel like it wasn't just 2. I feel like we all just left some money on the table, But like we said, you can't. We should have executed the plays better, but we did what we were supposed to do in the second half and made everything up.
There's a lot of things we got to clean up, to get to the goal that we're trying to get to. But overall, I feel like we did okay job. There's still a lot of things that we left on the field, a lot of things that we can clean up, and I feel like we're gonna get better at that every week.
Preparing for the home opener ahead, Alabama does not plan to leave any extra cash for New Mexico State to deposit.
We talked about trying to create an identity for ourselves. You don't do that in one game. You do it over a season, and you have to play to a standard, every opportunity that you get. And we certainly respect the team that we're playing.
The Crimson Tide has put in a lot of work this past week, and we're excited to see the improvements the team has made between weeks 1 and 2. We're just hours away from seeing those improvements ourselves, and we're excited to see what happens. Live on the Walk of Champions, I'm Rhea Thornton. Back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Rhea. That was a really interesting piece. Well, never being satisfied, even with success. That sounds like Alabama, doesn't it? And that's all part of Nick Saban's vaunted process. We have our own process here as well at CTKO, and part of that is we take commercial breaks to hear from our great sponsors. But when we come back to CTKO, we'll get right back at it as Don Staley from the Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports Commission will join the program. That and much more from the home opener. Crimson Tide Kickoffs presented by Alpha Insurance. We'll be right back.
How about my Steelers? They get a second and a fifth-round pick, and they just released Antonio Brown just a few minutes ago.
Raiders, do you go ahead and finally release him?
Bye-bye.
Well, listen, an organization like the Steelers, when they give up on a guy, there's a pretty good reason.
That's true.
Because of John Gruden. John Gruden thought he could do it. I don't think Mike
But it could change him.
I don't think Mayock ever liked
How about that?
Don. I don't think Mayock ever liked Brown, but Gruden was convinced.
I can fix him.
You can't fix the guy.
A little bit more out.
Yeah, what's
Okay.
saying? Don't listen to somebody. What somebody tells you they are. Just watch them long enough, and you'll see who they are.
We as coaches.
Yeah, you know
think
that.
we good.
All right, Big Daddy Don Staley.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff presented by Alpha Insurance. I'm Gary Harris. As always, here on CTKO, we like to have live guests. You know, there's some movers and shakers in this town, and this guy is certainly one of them. He came here as the head soccer coach, the first soccer coach at the University of Alabama. Now he heads up the Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports Commission. Talking about Don Staley, my pal. Good to see you, Don.
What's going on, my friend?
Well, I know you're running, and that's always the case. You don't ever stop. You've been busy putting events together, trying to get Tuscaloosa to the next level. It's a great town, but I know you feel like it even has more to offer. One of those events was the Druid City Music Festival, just recently held August 23rd and 24th. Now, listen, the weather's the weather. We're seeing that today. You can't cool it down. In that particular weekend, we couldn't get rid of the rain, but you still made a go of it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you surround yourself with enough good people, good things happen, and that's our case. Unfortunately, we had to shut down for, give or take, about 3 hours and change. You know, the show must go on. Unfortunately, we had to axe one of the groups and then cut into some other folks' times, but all in all, great event there at Government Plaza. Friday night, I give it about a 98% success rate. That the vibe, we checked a lot of boxes with the event, and proud of what we accomplished.
I'm assuming it's coming back.
We'll,
or you're going to look at possibility?
At the end of the month, we'll visit with our board. We'll do our post-event meeting on the 16th and go from there. Don
Staley, the president and CEO of Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, with us. Tell me about Elevate Tuscaloosa and give us an update on that.
Oh, my gosh. Game changer.
Yeah.
You know, for us in tourism and sports, I used to be the sports guy. Now I'm the CEO. And so we've got 3 divisions. We've got the tourism division, the sports, and then quality of life, community development. And for us to be able to bring in more meetings, conferences, conventions, to be in the game, you've got to have facilities. I mean, look at this beautiful facility here, one of the top in the country. So for us, we've got to be able to have that facility to go out and attract those events that help us economically. As far as sports, I mean, we've already got the footprint. We just need to fix a few things, tweak a few things, and then we can be competitive on going after every imaginable sporting event here. And then quality of life, I mean, between the amphitheater and all the other things that we do here in this community, we enhance that. The resume of this community goes up exponentially.
Yeah, of course, obviously, one big draw is Alabama football, and you're certainly going to take advantage of that.
You know, for us, no question about it, games like this are important. The longevity of a game being at 3 o'clock, we expect people to stick around and enjoy what we have to offer. Of course, just recently with being able to, on Sunday, stick around and have a mimosa maybe at 10:30, I think all those things add to the progressiveness of this community.
All right, you transition from coach into this field. I'm thinking, of course, I know how hard driven you were as a coach, but I'm thinking the coaching profession and what you're doing now has quite a few similarities and made it easier for you maybe than somebody that transitioned from another type of field.
Absolutely. I think it's leadership. You know, you learn from your mistakes. You learn from, you know, as parents, we learn from our parents. We take the good, the bad. Every person I worked with, every board member that I was part of working for, you take the good and you try to develop that into yourself as a coach, or in this case, a manager of people. So, yeah, I think the transition was pretty good.
Good to see you, Don.
Man, great seeing
Thanks
you,
for the
too.
time, buddy. All right, Don Staley, man. Yeah, let's get out there. I need to take some of your money. Just a few pennies here. We don't play for much. All right, when we come back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, if you're active on Twitter during Alabama games, you probably have seen tweets from a lot of the big Alabama fans. Some of them call them Gump Twitter. You know, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but we're going to find out. When we come back, our Alessandro Pomprion takes us inside the minds of some of the more prominent Tide tweeters when Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, returns here on WVUA 23.
Oh. Either you tweet or you don't. Wow, that's loud. Okay. I'm gonna have to turn that down a little. Either you tweet or you don't. But if you do and you love Alabama football, we have a couple of guys you need to follow.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff live here from the University of Alabama, presented by Alpha Insurance. Well, you know, some names just scream Alabama football, don't they? Obviously, Coach Bryant, Nick Saban, Joe Namath, Derek Thomas, Cornelius Bennett, John Hanna. I can go on and on and on. Another name synonymous with the Tide is Mr. Eddie Conyers, the longtime Crimson Tide practice official since 1962. He's seen it all in his days, and he is kind enough with us this season to share some of his stories with us. And we'd like to begin another segment of Eddie's thoughts with you right now.
Coach Donahue, who was Coach Bryant's defensive coordinator, and I dealt with him on getting officials. He called me one Friday about 2 o'clock and said, Coach Bryant wants to have a scrimmage in the stadium, and he wants 4 officials. And I really kind of got mad. I said, we don't have 4 officials. SEC opens tomorrow. They are not 4 officials. He said, hold on. Next thing I know, Coach Bryant was on the phone. He said, listen, Saturday week, we're going to play LSU in front of a bunch of Cajuns. There's going to be about 15 million people watching on television. He said, I ain't going to worry about 4 officials. You get them and have them there. So I got my son, who was in the 10th grade at Tuscaloosa High School. I got my next door neighbor, Pete Pearson, who's never called a football game in his life, but he's called 9,000 basketball games, top basketball official in the state. I called one other guy, his wife said he's in the hospital. I called him in the hospital. He told me they were going to let him out around 3 o'clock. I said, well, look, put you. I remember he told me I can't walk. I said, I don't care. Can you stand up? So anyway, make a long story short, we all get out to the stadium. Pete, my son, and the guy from the hospital. And we're doing pretty good. But I think it was Stedman Sheila at that time on a quarterback option. He runs about 3 yards down the field, gets hit, he reverses, he comes back behind the line of scrimmage, he goes about 5 yards down here and tackle. And Pete Pearson threw a flag, my basketball official. I said, Pete, I told you not to draw on a flag. What have you got? And he said, over and back. I said, Pete, that's basketball. Coach Bryant wanted to know what the penalty was. I said, well, Coach, he called over and back. He said, that's not football. That's no such basketball. But Pete, he don't know any different.
That's entertaining. And Eddie Conyers is a football icon at the University of Alabama, and the late, great Pete Pearson. We sure miss him as well. And you can catch much more and a lot of stories from Eddie Conyers throughout the rest of the season. Well, for the younger crowd of Alabama fans, it's not Conyers that necessarily rings a bell, but what about at Hunter Johnson or at Will Elliott? Those are the Twitter handles of some of the most visible Tide tweeters. And do they ever have a following? CTKO's Alessandra Pontbriand joins us now live on the Walk of Champions with a look at some of the most prominent members of the so-called Gump Twitter. Alessandra, explain this to me, please.
Now, if you tweet or you don't, but if you love Alabama football, we have a couple guys you need to follow. Everyone has their own opinions when they watch the Alabama Crimson Tide football team. For some, like Fluffopotamus88, aka Luke Ratliff, he likes to tweet his opinions to over 3,000 followers. You may ask yourself, how and why did he get so famous from a simple tweet?
It actually started, my following came from Alabama basketball, but it's crazy because I tweet about all sports now, and football is usually the best because there's a lot more internet traffic, a lot more people engaging with your content.
For Ratliff and Hunter Johnson, they watch many games at Innisfree Irish Pub in downtown Tuscaloosa. While Ratliff likes comical tweets like this one, Johnson likes his tweets controversial.
Sometimes it's something that's maybe negative that might make some Alabama fans mad, but they know there's always a hint of truth to it. So therefore, I feel like that's my favorite type of tweet.
Ratliff and Johnson have thousands of followers. You would think most of them live in the state of Alabama, but their reach is far beyond Bryant-Denny Stadium.
I had 3 or 4 people come up to me in Charlotte, North Carolina, and recognize me from online. I never get used to it, but it always happens.
I took a girl on a date to the 2015. I was living in Texas at the time. It was the Alabama-Wisconsin game, and she knew that I had a Twitter, and she knew it was her first big football game. So we're walking out, and somebody walks up to me and says, "Hunter L. Johnson, how's Sarah Catterson?" Sarah Catterson's my cat. And she was like, "What in the world? How did that guy know what your cat's name was?" I said, "Well, I tweet about my cats a lot."
With close to 10,000 followers, Will Elliott is known as a comedian of Alabama football. You may think he lives on Twitter, but he is here to set the record straight.
I feel like people think I'm real awkward in person or I have no life except Twitter. I'm very, very busy normally.
For Ratliff and Johnson, their tweets are spontaneous. Elliott says he likes spontaneity also, but for some games, he'll think before he tweets.
If I know we're going to beat a team, I'll start thinking of tweets after the game to say. But most of them are pretty spontaneous. I live tweet the game.
Next time you scroll through Twitter, you certainly will see at least one viral tweet about Alabama football. It probably will be from Fluffopotamus88, Hunter L. Johnson, or Will Elliott 22.
Now, those guys are great, but I have another person you should follow if you want all the up-to-date local sports news. It's A. Pompey on TV. I'll be waiting for your follower notification. Reporting live for Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm Alessandra Pompey. Back to you.
Thank you, Alessandra. Twitter is really something else, man. I mean, it's a whole community that engages with the world, and those guys are certainly entertaining. And follow Alessandra. Follow me, too, at Gary Harris _WVUA. Well, always fun keeping up with the Tide and more on social media. It was also fun last week watching a former Alabama quarterback playing for his new team. Yes, I'm talking about Jalen. The newest Sooner QB dazzled the fans in Norman and across the nation. Details on his history-making debut performance from 1 week ago and much more when Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, continues here on WVUA 23. I'll just try to pick it up. I'll just try to save some time. Like I said, next week we just tell probably just a tad higher.
Yeah, we'll get that little box.
I think with these glasses it's not noticeable.
Yeah, that little box that you see.
Yeah, perfect. And looking more at the
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, live from the University of Alabama campus on a hot one. I'm Gary Harris. Well, last Sunday, a lot of Alabama fans were glued to their TVs watching a different crimson-clad team, the Crimson and Cream of Oklahoma. Of course, that's because Jalen Hurts is now the quarterback there, and he made his debut, and he lit it up. He finished 20 of 23 for 332 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. He rushed for 176 yards and 3 more scores. Hurts was electric for Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma as they beat Houston 49-31. He set a career high in total offense with 508 total yards and joins Johnny Manziel as the only players in the past 15 years to throw for 300 yards and 3 scores and run for 150 and 3 scores in a game. Despite the nearly perfect night, Hurts expressed disappointment with how the game went. I guess he's still hanging on to a bit of the Alabama process. Here he is with Holly Rowe postgame.
You seem super disappointed right now, and yet you set a new school record for yards in a debut, and you're also the first Oklahoma quarterback in school history to throw for over 300 and rush for over 150. So can you be somewhat happy?
I got to go talk to my boys. We got to get right. We got to get better. We got to take more steps.
Well, no matter what team Jalen Hurts is playing for, Alabama fans, most of them at least, are fond of their former quarterback. And speaking of other teams, let's check in on the rest of the Southeastern Conference. CTKO's Alessandra Patrianis is back with us on the Walk of Champions with a look around the SEC. Alessandra?
Thanks, Gary. It's an interesting day around the SEC. There's a pair of huge out-of-conference games this afternoon, along with one SEC on SEC matchup. Some games already in action. West Virginia is in Columbia, Missouri, taking on the Mizzou Tigers. Charleston Southern, on the other hand, is in Columbia, South Carolina, matching up with the Gamecocks. And Vanderbilt is on the road taking on Purdue. Then at 2:30, arguably the biggest game of the weekend, number 12 Texas A&M will take on top-ranked Clemson in Death Valley. And also at 2:30, Southern Miss will take on Mississippi State in Starkville. Kicking off with the Tide at 3 o'clock will be Murray State and Georgia in Athens. Then at 6 o'clock, Tennessee looks to bounce back against BYU at home. Then at 6:30, the second biggest game in the conference, LSU on the road in Austin, taking on the Texas Longhorns. Also at 6:30 will be Tulane versus Auburn on the Plains, UT Martin versus Florida in the Swamp, Eastern Michigan taking on Kentucky in Lexington, and finally an all-SEC matchup, Arkansas in Oxford taking on the Ole Miss Rebels, also at 6:30. So despite just being the second week of this season, up and down the action in the SEC, it's not too shabby, even outside of the 2 heavyweight games.
Thanks, Alessandra. Indeed, some good games today in the SEC or involving SEC teams. Well, last week, Alabama was already up big when Jerry Jeudy pulled off an incredible catch and run for a touchdown to put the Tide up 35-3. He caught the football, immediately made a spin move, blew past the Duke DB, and then powered his way into the end zone. It was an impressive play, but that's become the norm for number 4.
That was just a freestyle. I tried to set him up a little bit, but it didn't go as planned, so I just had to give him a little hezzy and a stiff arm and run past. All that just reaction. I don't really plan none of that. It's just reaction, just not trying to let the guy tackle me.
Some things that Jerry can do, everybody's not able to do. I mean, it's like he got like some spider senses or something with somebody around him. So, I mean, like, he's gifted, and I mean, it just depends on who the person is and how you react to things.
While Jeudy and the offense put up big numbers against the Blue Devils last week, some members of the offense felt that they could have done more, and they plan to change that. CTKO's Julie Daniels explains.
With a 42-3 victory over the Duke Blue Devils, Alabama fans were left satisfied after the first week of Crimson Tide football. As for the team, they felt their performance left a lot to be desired, especially in the trenches.
We need to do better, up front, probably on a consistent basis. I think pass protection was pretty good for the most part, and we were able to operate and get the ball in a lot of playmakers' hands on the perimeter, and that was, the difference in the game. So, there's obviously things that I'm sure when we watch the film, every player is going to say we could do better, and I don't think it'll be any different up front.
For their first time being together in a game setting, Jedrick Wills Jr. thought that his unit did a pretty good job.
I said that we did pretty well for like us 5 guys being out there together for the first time and just kind of having some new guys in their positions. Watch film today and see what we can improve for next week.
But the O-line is far from a finished product. Coach Saban reiterated that early season games help determine the best lineup, and that consistency will follow close behind.
We always want to try to get the best guys on the field, so we try to get them experience at various positions early in the season, and that helps you determine what the best combinations of players will be. So when you ask the question, is that how it will be all year? Probably not. Will we continue to do it in the short term? Probably. There was a number of occasions where we had a hat on a hat and we did not finish blocks like we need to be able to run the ball effectively. So all those little things are things that we need to do to improve and get better. And, I think a lot of times you make great improvement between the first and second game, and that'll certainly be our goal, this time around.
For Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm Julia Daniels.
Thank you, Julia. It's picking up as we approach the noon hour. We're going to give you a quick glimpse of the Walk of Champions. And when we come back, George Husak, Alabama men's tennis coach, will join us to talk Bama men's tennis. Stay with us. I guess because you know how these things are with sports and all this stuff. It's probably in someone's bedroom on campus or in a sports bar somewhere or something. So they ordered us another one. Because the backdrop is so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I told Steve, I said, it's
brutal.
You bump up your mic just a little bit higher.
Sure thing. There.
Got it where you want it.
Does that work?
How's that sound?
Give me a couple things here, Coach. It's Cocavolta.
Yeah, Patrick Kokovalta. Uh-huh. He's back. Kutrovsky. Okay.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, live from the University of Alabama. I'm Gary Harris, joined by Alabama men's tennis coach George Husak. And we love having coaches from other sports on CTKO, and certainly I love visiting with Coach because he's built quite a program here. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You know, last couple of years, NCAA tournament, Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. Your doubles team from this past season made it to the NCAA championship, and you got a lot of guys coming back, plus some new players. So it's looking pretty good.
It feels good. It feels good. The vibe here after the last couple of weeks has been great with our 8 returners and 2 newcomers, but the last couple of years have been very special and certainly something we want to build off of.
You got a couple new assistant coaches, too, that you're bringing in. And I know that's part of the coaching business. You lose some, but sometimes when you've got a program that's kind of rolling the way you are, it's exciting to get a little new blood to kind of give you some new ideas and kick some things around with you.
100%. And very happy for Robbie Weiss and Lalo Ugalde, who both got head jobs here over the summer. And that was, not that I'm Bill Walsh or anything, but it's good for them. We have Dimi Kutrovsky, who is University of Texas all-time wins leader. And he comes to us from Texas San Antonio, where he coached for 4 years. And Andrew Goodwin, who is a former player of mine and former assistant coach. And those guys really have made me I'm very grateful to have them, but they've got a lot of experience and certainly know exactly. Andrew's been here, so he knows what we're trying to do from an Alabama standpoint. And Dimi was one of those toughest competitors I ever coached against. So they add a lot to the team.
All right, you got your first fall tournament coming up next weekend.
Yes.
And talk about the fall schedule and what you're hoping to get accomplished.
Yeah, the main thrust of the season always starts in January, ends in late May. So in the fall, we really have to prepare. And next weekend, we've got the Foreign Fall Championships. We've got 8 outstanding teams, 5 from the SEC that are coming here to play. And it is the first of about 10 fall tournaments that we'll have our guys prepare and compete in. And when we're playing in these fall tournaments, there's no team result. It's all individual based. And really, it's kind of a, it's a rehearsal for 3 months, getting ready for January. So a lot of things that we're working on, but we kind of divide guys up based on what we think is the best for them, where they're at in their school year, where they're at from a ranking standpoint, and give them different opportunities throughout the fall.
All right, we're wrapping up on time, but we've talked about this before. You came here with a vision, but it's taken a lot of hard work. And now to get it to where it's at and even bigger things expected, it's got to feel good. I know it's not finished, but you have to have a lot of self-satisfaction in what you've been able to do here.
I'm glad I still have my job. It was very clear at the beginning, got a little cloudy, and now getting clearer. As Coach Saban said the other night, I heard him say, win is what's important now. And right now is to get better. And every day you wake up, lucky that we're here, great place to work, incredible university, and that's what's important. We got to get better.
Mason Osama's gone, but Kokovalta's back, so that's good news.
He's back, yeah. Big Daddy's gone, and the kids are ready to take over the house.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Gary.
Good to see you. Crimson Tide Kickoff will continue right after this.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
Welcome to the Burn Point with University of Alabama Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne. Looking forward to this great segment. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Gary.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the Crimson Standard. Huge undertaking. Just bring us up to speed. Where's it stand?
Yeah, well, we've been very fortunate with the generosity of our donors across the board. We've been aggressive in our asking to continue to move the program forward, and the giving overall, whether it's philanthropic, not tied to any seating, or giving that's been tied to new club seats, new skyboxes, has been really good. And part of what we have tried to communicate regularly is the revenue from those areas are giving us the opportunity to invest in all the other areas of our department. It's going to allow us to update and renovate a lot of Malmore, where we're sitting here today. Not our office area, but the locker room. We're going to add a sports science center, which will be the first of its kind in the country. Our medical areas, that has become such a big part of recruiting compared to what it used to be. It used to be on a recruiting trip and you say, well, that's where you get your ankle taped. Now it's mental health. Now it's recovery. Now it's nutrition on top of the dining hall. It's just so multifaceted. We want to make sure we're on the front end of that. Obviously, those areas don't produce revenue. And so these areas that we're going to be able to generate the revenue from will help us from an economic model to pay for everything else. But when we've shared the vision and talked to our supporters about it, they've really bought in, which we're very fortunate for. And I've said this multiple times. It's so important that we honor our history, which we have incredible history, and we will always do that here at Alabama. Then at the same time, too, be very focused on today. And our coaches and our student athletes do a wonderful job of that, but then at the same time create vision for the future of where you're going. And that's what the Crimson Standard has allowed us to do, is to give us a 10-year plan. I said the very first day we unveiled it, here's the big plan, and it's going to be fluid. There will be changes as we dig deeper into different areas and trying to understand what we have to work with from an architectural standpoint, how the fundraising goes, how the market is from a construction standpoint. Those will all impact the long-term decision-making, but overall, we've been very fortunate. Our development staff has done a great job of being out there and asking and tried to help however I can. We've had Coach Saban involved, had some of our other coaches involved too, and we start softball here in the next couple of weeks, renovations out at Rhodes Stadium, and then we will hopefully start Bryant-Denny Stadium after the football season here in 2019, and Malmore in a similar time frame.
Obviously, Bryant-Denny Stadium is one of the most visible aspects of this. Give us some details again. I know people saw the unveiling, but the renovations that are going to happen at the football stadium.
Yeah, so we're going to obviously we're going to move the press box over to the northeast side of the stadium, more towards the corner. We're going to have skyboxes, club seats at different levels, loge boxes over there on the west side of the stadium. We are going to have 4 new video boards for our fans to improve that. We've better technology, bigger than what we currently have. We're going to renovate the locker room at Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're going to double the space from a recruiting standpoint in our recruiting area up above, so we can hopefully get rid of the sardine effect we have up there at times. And so and then we're going to do some things with elevators, not as grand as what we want to do long term, because we need to continue to have more elevators to get people up to the upper deck. We've actually looked at escalators, because I get asked about that regularly. From an efficiency standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to do as many elevators as we can to get up to the upper decks, so people can have better access to that. Right now, we're pretty limited with that. We have the walkways and the spirals, and that's an area we need to improve for our general fans. Also try to do some concession and restrooms earlier than what we originally planned, but it is very costly to do those things, and so we're working on that. I think we're making progress. I don't want to say absolutely that we're doing it, but I think we're making progress on some better Wi-Fi solutions that will have a very positive impact for our fan base too.
As we wrap up this edition of the Burn Point, as you said, this is a tiered process. Coleman Coliseum, everything still on schedule to get started in the original time frame?
Yeah, with Coleman, we've been very purposely not specific on when. We've given ranges. Obviously, the revenue from phase 1 is going to dramatically impact our ability to move forward with Coleman. The other thing is the further we dig into it, we did probably a 30,000 foot view look in at Coleman. We're going to have to get deeper than that and understand, okay, let's make sure these numbers are accurate so we can have a long-term business model that makes sense, because it's obviously a 30 or 40-year decision. But that's an important part of what we do. The energy that Nate Oates has already brought and the importance of gymnastics, and we want to continue to improve in women's basketball. Coleman's an important part of that, of having success for that long term.
Outstanding update.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Gary.
He's Greg Byrne. I'm Gary Harris. This has been The Burn Point. monitor right now, so I'm just going to have to follow this. Yeah, they unhooked it and hooked it back up, and then Daniel unhooked it again.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, Alabama fans, I think we're excited to see Coach Saban in midseason form last week, despite it just being the first game of the season. In the third quarter against Duke, Alabama was issued a sideline warning following their celebration on Trayvon Diggs' interception. Coach Saban was not happy with that warning, and he gave the ref an earful before being issued an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. This week, Coach said he wasn't proud of his actions and that he faced some disciplinary action when he got home.
Miss Terry made me run on a treadmill for 20 minutes. The leadership group had a meeting and they wanted to implement some disciplinary action, but it kind of got overruled.
Well, it seems even Coach Saban is held accountable when he gets home with Miss Terry. And even though she doesn't control the weather, I still think I'm going to hold Danielle Davis accountable for the heat this afternoon. It goes with the territory. She's standing by with the latest on the forecast on the Walk of Champions with your final game day forecast. Danielle, it's just, it's brutal.
Yes, Gary, I wish I can control it, but it is dangerously hot out here this afternoon. And taking a look at the watch warning map, heat advisory issued in Tuscaloosa until 9 p.m. Feels like 100 right now, and that's just going to go up as we move throughout the afternoon. Your sweatcast, muggy, sticky, tropical, playing through all the way to the afternoon by the end of the game. So moving through from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Yep, saying hot and muggy. And then your game forecast right now this afternoon here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We're looking at a 3 p.m. kickoff time and temperatures in the upper 90s, likely to feel like 110 in the stadium this afternoon and only cooling down to the 90s by 6 p.m. That's your game forecast.
Well, thank you, Danielle. And it is going to be hot, but it's the home opener. There are plenty of water stations, sunscreen stations. Come on out to the game this afternoon. Kickoff is about 3 hours away, and that's going to wrap things up here on CTKO. You can catch a replay and watch it anytime at WVUA23.com. A reminder that post-game we'll have Nick Saban's press conference live on WVUA23, and then tonight at 10, join Alessandra Pombrion for a complete recap of the game and other action from today as well. For all of us here at WVUA23 and Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for tuning in. Roll Tide.